Hello everyone. Today we are going to dive into one of the most important concepts in microeconomics, that is demand and supply. These concepts are fundamental in understanding how the markets operate, and by the end of the class, you'll have a solid understanding of how they work. So let's begin. Okay, so our key learning objectives for today are to understand the law of demand, to learn the factors that influence demand and supply, to differentiate between the movements along the curve and shifts in the curve, and finally, to understand how the demand and supply determine the prices out there in the market. Okay, so this is what we are going to do today. And in order to do this effectively, let's understand what a market is and how the buyers and the sellers interact in such markets. So first, let's talk about the market. So let's understand the role of markets in determining prices, and then we'll talk about demand and supply. So what is a market? A market, as you know, is a place where buyers and sellers meet. Markets can be physical and local mandis. Okay, it can also be virtual, like an e-commerce marketplace. Some of the markets are product specific, such as a vegetable market where only vegetables are sold, while others may have a variety of products in the same marketplace. What's important to note here is that in a competitive market, no single buyer or seller can control the price. The price is collectively determined by all the buyers and all the sellers. Okay. Examples of a competitive market will include fruits, vegetables, fuel market. Okay. So imagine you're buying potatoes at a market. Have you ever wondered how the price of a potato is actually determined? It's not randomly fixed by the vendor. It's based on the demand and supply of potatoes. Factors like the production cost, transportation costs, and consumer demand all contribute to the final price that is prevailing out there in the market. Okay. So that is market. Now, what is demand? Let's move on to the concept of demand now. It's very important and crucial to distinguish between desire and demand. Desire is simply the wish to own something, while demand is the desire backed by purchasing power and the willingness to pay. Okay. For example, as a student, you may desire a new laptop, but unless you have the money to buy it or someone is willing to buy it for you, it remains a desire, not a demand. Okay. The key difference between desire and demand is the purchasing power and the willingness to pay. Another distinction between demand and quantity demanded is that demand refers to the general willingness to buy a good at a certain price, while the quantity demanded refers to the exact amount of a good that a person is willing to buy at a specific price. For example, if Raghu is willing to buy potatoes at say 15 rupees a kg, that's demand. But if he says that he wants to buy exactly 3 kg at 15 rupees, that's the quantity demanded. Okay. I hope I am being clear. If I am, then type C in the chat box. Now it's a good time to understand the determinants of demand, or what are the factors that influence the demand, also known as the determinants of demand. There are four major determinants. They are as follows. Price of the good. This is the most important factor. When the prices go up, the quantity demanded usually goes down. And when the prices go down, the demand increases. This is known as the law of demand, right? So what is the law for demand? As the quantity demanded usually goes up and the prices go down. Okay. So when the price goes up, quantity demanded usually goes down. When the prices go down, the quantity increases. Next determinant, income. As the people's income increases, their demand for goods also usually increases. For example, if your pocket money is doubled, and I can already see how happy each of you are there with that idea, you can buy more of your favorite, let's call it ice cream. Okay. So as your income increases, the demand for the goods also increases. Third, taste and preferences. Demand changes with consumer preferences as well. For instance, people no longer prefer landline phones as smartphones have become more popular due to the technological advancements. Okay, so the taste and preferences has changed over time. Okay, there are two types of related goods. The next determinant is the price of the related good. So, two types of related good. One is a complementary good, and the other is a substitute good. If the price of a complementary good like petrol and a car, so if the petrol for a car increases, the demand for cars may decrease. Similarly, if the price of a substitute good like tea increases, people might prefer to have more coffee. So tea and coffee are substitute. Price of tea increases, consumption of coffee increases. Okay. Price of petrol increases, the car demand decreases. So complementary. So these are the different determinants of demand, as I have explained. Now that we have seen the determinants of demand, it's important to look at it graphically. Okay, so let's go on the whiteboard. Let's take a look at it graphically as well. So let's see. Let's firstly talk about the first determinant, that was the price of the good, most important and the first determinant, price of the good. So now let's make a table. For example, this is price and this is quantity. 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 20, 15, say 10, 8, 6. Okay. So if I were to draw the diagram on how it will look in the PQ space, price 20, quantity is 20, price 30, quantity is 15. So what you'll realize is you'll get a downward sloping demand curve. So whenever the law of demand is satisfied, I will, but obvious, get a downward sloping demand curve, because as the price is increasing, the quantity is reducing. Okay. So the price and the quantity have inverse relationship. Okay. Now let's come to the second determinant, that is income. Okay. Now, as I have already shared with you, let's assume that your parents have increased your pocket money. Instead of getting 100, now you get 200 as your pocket money. Now, how will that affect your demand for ice cream? Okay. So, you will obviously have more money, so you can buy more of the good. So, what effect will that increased income have on your demand? That we can show by a diagram which looks like this. So this is supposing the demand curve with income 100, the demand curve with income 200 will obviously see the quantity increasing. So if, for example, you used to consume, supposing this is quantity, this is my price. Same price at say 30. If I was earlier consuming say 15, now I'm consuming 30 because my income has doubled. This is my demand earlier, this is my new demand. Okay. So as you can see in this figure, with the increase in income, the demand curve is shifting parallelly to the right. Okay, that is what is happening. Now let's come to the third aspect, that is changes in taste and preferences. And as I gave you an example for the same as well, okay, let's take a look at what happens with a change in the technology. So earlier, as I said, we used to have landline phones, but now with the advent of smartphones, who is going to buy a landline? So because of a technological change, the quantity of landline demanded will definitely go down. So that would be represented in the following manner. Again, it's similar to income, but the only thing is that now it's an internal shift. This is my price, this is my quantity. Let's, because of a change in technology, now what is happening is that the demand curve shifts to the left. Because of technological change, the demand for landline phones going down due to the advent of smartphones. Okay, so that's another example of a determinant of demand. Okay, now it's a good idea to take a look at a few examples or a few questions. These are a few questions which should be seen. Uh, a good idea for you to take a look at these questions. What will happen to the demand of the good in the following circumstances? An increase in the price of the complementary good, a decrease in income, increase in wealth of the family, increase in the price of the substitute good, decrease in the price of the good itself. So these are a few questions which you should ask yourself, and the answer is already very, very clear. You just have to rewind the video and see it, and the answer will be there. Okay, so take a look at this and try to answer for each of them. And obviously, the fourth one was the price of related good. So depending on whether the good is a substitute or a complementary good, that is how it will affect the quantity. Yeah. Now that we have understood the determinants of demand, it's now important to take a look at the difference between an individual and a market demand. Okay, so individual demand refers to how much one consumer is willing to buy at a given price. Market demand is the sum of all individual demands at that price. So, for example, if Raghu is willing to buy 3 kg of potato at a price of 15 rupees, and Ahmed is willing to buy 1 kg of potato at the same price, the market demand will be 3 plus 1, that's equal to 4 kg of potato. Okay, 3 from the demand of Raghu and 1 from the demand of Ahmed. Okay, so market demand curves are simply the horizontal summation of individual demand curves. On a graph, the market demand will reflect the total quantity demanded by all consumers at each price level. Okay, so if we were to put this on a diagram, let's take a look at this. Okay, okay. So for example, the price is 15. This is price 15. This is basically the price, and this is quantity of Raghu, quantity of Ahmed, and this is the total quantity. So Raghu is demanding, say, quantity 3, Ahmed demanding quantity 1. Supposing the demand curve of Raghu is this, Ahmed is this. The total demand when it comes to the market is 4. This is 1, this is 3, this is 4. So this is the market demand curve. So this is the demand curve of Raghu, this is the demand curve of Ahmed, this is the market demand curve. Okay, so the market demand curve is nothing but the horizontal summation of individual demand curve. So this is Ahmed's demand curve, this is Raghu's demand curve. Okay. Okay, so that's what it is. Now, Let's now go into movements and shifts of demand curve. Okay, so we need to distinguish between movements along the demand curve and the shift in the demand curve. Okay, movements along the curve happen when there is a change in the price of the good, resulting in either an increase or decrease in the quantity demanded. Okay, so movement along the curve happens because of a change in price. For example, ice cream price rise, fewer people will buy it, causing an upward movement along the demand curve. Okay, shift in the demand curve is when factors other than the price change. For instance, if people's income increases, they may buy more of the ice cream at the same price. Shifting the entire demand curve is happening towards the right. Okay, so let's put this on the graph again. Good idea to take a look at the graph. Let's take again a very simplistic diagram. So if the price of the ice cream increases from 20 to 27, the quantity goes down from 15 to 12, and there is a movement from point A to point B on the demand curve. Okay, that is what I was sharing. That this upward movement is taking place when the price of the commodity increases, leading to a decline in the quantity demanded. Since the quantity demanded has declined, it's also known as a contraction of the demand. So in the graph that you can see, the demand curve has not shifted. Rather, there is an upward movement along the same demand curve. ठीक है? ये समझ में आ रहा है सबको? If this is okay, then type okay in the chat box. Similarly, with a decrease in price, there will be a downward movement in the demand curve. Okay. So that's also very easy to see that if the price decreases from say 20 to 15, the quantity increases from say 15 to 18. So a decrease in price will lead to an increase in the quantity that will lead to an movement from point A to point C along the demand curve. So this basically shows movement along the demand curve. All right. Now let's talk about shift along the demand curve. Okay. Shift in the demand curve. So a shift in the demand curve is where the entire demand moves either to the right or to the left. Okay. It displays a change in demand for a fixed price. Now, a shift in the curve may take place because of an increase in income, as I've already shared, or a change in the technology, or a decrease in income. Various other factors can lead to shifts in the demand curve. So, as we have seen earlier, how does the shift look? Very quickly, let's draw it once more. So, at the same price, because the income has increased, the demand curve shifts to the right. Supposing the price is 20, earlier the quantity demanded was 18, now the quantity demanded is 28. Because of an increase in the price, in the income. So the income increases is an example of a shift in the demand curve. Right? So anything other than price, if it changes, it will look at a shift in the demand curve. All right. Okay. थोड़ा एक्सरसाइज देखें. चलिए देखते हैं. Please try and solve this. So specify in each of these cases whether there will be a shift or a movement in the demand curve. Number one, increase in the price of good, seasonal change in demand, increase in wealth during wartime, increase in train ticket sale due to vacation. So which will be a shift in the demand, which will be a movement along the demand curve. Okay. You can pause the video and put in the answer on your own just as an exercise. चलो ठीक है, अब नेक्स्ट एस्पेक्ट को देखेंगे. Let's try and understand now what is supply. Okay, तो डिमांड तो हमने देख लिया, अब सप्लाई में चलते हैं. That what do we mean by supply? So let's switch the perspective from the buyers to the sellers now. Supply refers to how much of a good producers are willing to sell at different prices. Just like demand, there is a difference between supply and quantity supplied. Supply is the general willingness to sell at various prices, while quantity supplied is the amount that the sellers are willing to sell at a specific price. Okay, so let's now understand and talk about the various determinants of supply. So these are all the determinants of supply. First one, price of the commodity. When prices increase, producers are willing to supply more because they can make more profit. This is the law of supply. So in the case of demand, the demand curve was negatively sloped. A supply curve will be positively sloped because as the prices are increasing, the producers are willing to supply more. Zyada price mein, you as a producer will obviously supply more, right? Cost of production. The cost of producing a good rises, the supply may decrease because it becomes less profitable for the producers to sell at the same price. Okay. Third factor, technological advancements. Improvements in technology make the production more efficient, leading to an increase in supply. Fourth, last but not the least, the number of sellers. The number of sellers in a market increases, the greater is the total supply in the market. So these are the components which affect the supply. Okay. Let's take a look at the graph and understand. Let's take a look at an example. Suppose a shopkeeper sells a pen for rupees 10, and at this price, he is able to make a small profit of say rupees 1. If he was selling 100 quantity of pens, now suddenly the price of the same pen increases to 15. The seller will be able to sell more, like for example, 200. Okay, because the marginal cost of producing 200 is higher than the marginal cost of producing 100. Therefore, the supplier will increase the supply of pens from 100 to 200. Okay, the phenomenon where other things being the same, when the price of the commodity increases, the quantity supplied increases, is also known as the law of supply. So the phenomenon where, let's put this on the whiteboard, or let's put this here. Other things being the same, when the price of commodity increases, the quantity supplied also increases. This is known as the law of supply. Okay. The supply line is also known as the supply line is also known as the marginal cost line. Okay. So let's take a look at this case and the supply curve. So let's draw two figures. Okay. Marginal cost, average cost, average cost, marginal cost. So the part that is above the minimum point of the average cost on the marginal cost gives us the supply. This gives us the supply curve. Positively sloped. Unlike the demand curve. Okay. So as you can see in this figure, the supply curve is positively sloping. That is, it is moving upward from left to right. The positively sloped supply curve basically shows that there is a positive correlation between the price and the quantity supplied. So as the price increases, the quantity supplied will also increase. Okay. Next determinant, as we were seeing, is the cost of production. Now, the cost of production obviously has a direct impact on the seller's potential profit. A rise in the cost of, say, the input deters them from manufacturing and hence decreases the supply of the good at the same price. So what happens is a leftward shift in the supply curve. So if I were to show it on a whiteboard, cost. If this was the earlier supply curve, because of increases in the input cost, the new supply curve is shifting upwards. At the same price, the quantity that it is willing to supply is going down. Let's say price 20, 20 goes down to 60. That's a shift in the supply curve, and that happens because the cost of production has increased. An example of the same would be, as I said, a increase in the input prices. Okay. Third factor, which is a determinant of the supply curve, is technological upgrades. So technological upgrades, an upgrade in the technology will see the shift in the supply curve to the right hand side. So this is cost of production. Let's use a different color. Let's use this. Um, Technological upgradation would mean that the supply curve now shifts to the right, and at the same price, because now the producer is able to produce more efficiently, it is being able to produce a higher quantity. The movement from S to S double dash because of technological upgradation, or a movement from 20 to 28. Okay. And obviously, last but definitely not the least, the number of sellers. Now, as the number of sellers is increasing, that would obviously lead to a right hand side shift in the supply curve, because now more sellers are participating in the market, so the overall supply of goods in the market would increase. So, for example, the market for smartphones. Uh, a few years back, there was just a handful of smartphone producers. But now, with the increase in the number of sellers for smartphones, the supply of smartphones in the market has increased exponentially, manifold. Okay. So that's the last aspect. At this juncture, let's now head into the next aspect, that is the individual and the market supply curve. Okay. So let's now talk about the individual and the market supply curve. Just as with demand, we can talk about individual supply and market supply. Individual supply is how much one producer is willing to sell at a given price. The market supply is obviously the total amount that all the producers are willing to sell. On a graph, the market supply curve is the horizontal summation of all the individual supply curves. Okay, so that will look how? That will look something like this. Let's graph it again. Okay, let's take the example of Raghu and Ahmed once more. Supposing Raghu and Ahmed are now sellers. This is the total quantity. This is the price. Suppose at price 15, Raghu is wanting to sell 3 unit. Ahmed is willing to sell 4 unit. Price 15. Raghu willing to sell 3. Ahmed willing to sell 4. Therefore, the entire supply in the market is 7. Okay. So if this was the supply for Raghu, this is the supply for Ahmed, and this is the supply for the market. Supply of the market. Okay. So basically at the same price, I'm adding all the quantities that are produced by individual sellers. That basically gives me the market supply curve, as simple as that. Now, like the demand, it's important for us to talk about shifts and movements in the supply curve. Okay. So like demand, supply curves also experience movements and shifts. Movement along the supply curve happens when there is a change in the price of the good. For example, if the price of milk increases, dairy farmers may be willing to supply more milk, causing an upward movement along the supply curve. Okay, and the shift in the supply curve occurs when other factors like the production costs or the technology is changing. So, for example, if the cost of wheat decreases, bakers can produce more bread, shifting the supply curve to the right. So, the input cost has gone down, basis which the bakers are able to produce more bread, shifting the supply curve towards the right. So, a movement and shift along the supply curve. Let's give examples very quickly. It's self-explanatory, but it's important to put it in the diagram. Movement is happening because of an increase in the price. Okay. Right. The upward movement takes place when the price of the commodity increases, leading to an increase in the quantity supplied. Okay. And the downward movement will happen with the decrease in the price, leading to a decrease in the supply. So if this is A to B and the decrease would be A to C. Okay. This is movement. Let's now talk about shift of the supply curve. Shift of the supply curve. A shift in the supply curve is where the entire supply curve moves either to the right or to the left. Okay. Rightward shift example, suppose the supply of raw material, say milk, has increased in the market. Because of this, there has been a decline in the price of milk. Okay. Reducing the cost of producing cheese. So you as a seller of cheese will increase the production and supply more cheese to the market because the raw material price has actually gone down. Okay, so this is an example of a rightward shift. A leftward shift would be supposing a situation where there is war. Okay, there are multiple wars currently going on. I don't know why it's happening. Where the war broke out between two countries. Okay, country A and country B. For example, country A was the major producer of coffee and used to supply coffee throughout the world. However, because of the war, coffee production in country A is stopped, and most of the resources were diverted towards supplying arms and ammunitions. Okay, in such a case, country A was unable to supply the same amount of coffee around the world as it used to do earlier. Therefore, the supply curve of coffee will shift to the left. Okay, so these are examples of shift in the supply curve. Let's put it on the graph. This is the original. This is the shift to the right because of a decrease in raw material prices, and this is a shift to the left because of a war situation. So this is war situation. This is shift to the right because of decrease in raw material prices. And a decrease in the supply curve is happening because of war situation. These are just examples that I'm giving you. Why would there be shift in the supply curve? There will be umpteen examples. Basically, the idea is that uh, the shift in the supply curve will happen only when the price is not changing, everything else is changing. Okay. If the price is changing, then it is a movement along the supply curve. So let's now summarize what we have covered till now. The demand and supply are the two forces that basically determine the prices in the market. Demand depends on factors like price, income, preferences of the consumer, while supply depends on factors like production costs and the number of sellers. Okay, so when the price changes, there is a movement along the demand or the supply curve, but when factors change, the curves shift. Okay, understanding these principles is the key to analyzing how a market will function. Okay, so that's what it is. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining in and making understanding supply and demand effective. Okay, so I hope that now supply and demand is much easily understandable, as I have been able to give you all the concepts and examples that make it more realistic. Okay, right. Thank you, everyone, and now we'll go on to the next.